Zara Zimmerman's voice cracked mid-sentence as she muttered to the empty conference room, telling the walls about how nobody seemed to care that the employee wellness initiative she'd poured 3 months into was collecting dust on someone's desk. And she didn't realize the CEO had been standing in the doorway for the past 5 minutes, listening to every word. She pressed her palms against the mahogany table, shoulders slumped forward, exhaustion seeping through every movement. The marketing firm where she worked as a mid-level project coordinator had been her dream job once, back when she'd first walked through those glass doors 2 years ago. Now it felt like shouting into a void. And I know the mental health days matter, she continued, speaking to the empty chairs as if they might somehow validate her frustration. I've seen Sarah crying in the bathroom 3 times this week. I've watched Marcus fall asleep at his desk because he's been pulling all-nighters for a campaign that could have waited. But does anyone upstairs care? No. They just want the profit margins to look good for the quarterly report. Zara pushed away from the table, running her fingers through her dark brown hair. She'd stayed late again, after everyone else had gone home, working on revised proposals that probably wouldn't get read. The city lights of downtown Seattle sparkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a reminder that life was happening out there while she was stuck in here, tilting at corporate windmills. "I'm talking to furniture now," she said with a bitter laugh. "That's what my life has become. 26 years old and having conversations with conference tables because at least they don't interrupt me." She gathered her papers, stuffing them into her worn leather messenger bag. Tomorrow she'd try again. She always tried again. That was her problem, really. She cared too much about things that didn't care back. The elevator ride down felt longer than usual. Zara leaned against the mirrored wall, seeing her reflection stare back at her. Rumpled blouse, tired eyes, the kind of exhaustion that came from fighting battles nobody asked you to fight. Her best friend Melissa had told her just last week to stop caring so much, to just do her job and go home. But Zara couldn't. She'd seen what happened when companies forgot that employees were people first, profit generators second. Her apartment was a 20-minute bus ride away, a small one-bedroom in Capitol Hill that ate up most of her paycheck, but had a window seat where she could read on Sunday mornings. She dropped her bag by the door, kicked off her heels, and collapsed onto her second-hand couch. Her phone buzzed with a text from her younger brother asking to borrow money again. She'd send it, even though she probably shouldn't. That was another thing she couldn't seem to stop doing, caring about people who took advantage of it. The next morning came too quickly. Zara dragged herself through her routine. Shower, coffee, the same oatmeal she ate every day because it was cheap and healthy. She chose a navy dress that made her look more professional than she felt, applied makeup to hide the shadows under her eyes, and headed back into the battlefield. The office buzzed with its usual morning energy. People clustered around the coffee station, discussing their weekends, their plans, their lives outside these walls. Zara smiled at the appropriate moments, nodded when expected, but her mind was already running through her task list. She needed to follow up on the wellness initiative, finish the client presentation for the Westbrook account, and somehow find time to grab lunch instead of eating crackers at her desk again. Zara got a minute. Her immediate supervisor, Janet, appeared beside her cubicle with a stack of folders. "I need you to take over the Morrison project. Kelly called in sick, and the presentation is on Friday." "That's in 3 days," Zara said, trying to keep her voice level. "And I'm already managing 4 other projects." I know, but you're the only one who can handle it. You're so good at juggling things." Janet deposited the folders on Zara's already cluttered desk. "You're a lifesaver, really." Zara watched her supervisor walk away, that familiar feeling of being simultaneously valued and taken advantage of settling into her chest. She was good at her job, which meant she got more work. It was a vicious cycle with no escape route. She spent her lunch break in the building's courtyard, eating a sandwich from the deli downstairs while reviewing the Morrison files. The project was a mess. Timelines completely unrealistic and client expectations through the roof. Classic. "Mind if I sit?" a male voice asked. Zara looked up to find a man in an expensive charcoal suit standing beside her bench. He was tall, probably early 30s, with dark hair and striking blue eyes that seemed to actually see her, not just look at her. She glanced around the courtyard, noting at least a dozen empty benches. "Sure," she said anyway, moving her papers to make room. He sat down with easy confidence, the kind that came from never having to question whether he belonged somewhere. "Beautiful day," he commented, looking up at the rare Seattle sunshine. "It is," Zara agreed, returning her attention to her files. "Working through lunch, isn't everyone?" She didn't mean to sound bitter, but it came out that way. He smiled, and it transformed his entire face from handsome to devastating. "Not everyone. Some of us are trying to remember what it's like to eat a meal without a laptop." Despite herself, Zara smiled back. "How's that going?" "Harder than it should be," he admitted. "I'm Vincent, by the way, Vincent Walsh, Zara Zimmerman." She shook his offered hand, noting the firm grip, the warmth of his palm. "Do you work in the building?" "Something like that," he said, his expression amused. "You, fourth floor, marketing." She took another bite of her sandwich, trying to gauge if he was being friendly or flirty. Men in expensive suits didn't usually strike up conversations with her on random Tuesday afternoons. "What kind of marketing?" Vincent leaned back, apparently in no hurry to leave. "Project coordination, mostly. Managing campaigns, keeping timelines on track, herding cats." She paused. "Why am I telling you this?" "Because I asked." He looked genuinely interested, which was strange. "And because you seem like someone who has a lot to say that people don't usually ask about." That hit closer to home than Zara expected. She studied him more carefully. "Are you a therapist or something?" Vincent laughed, a rich sound that made something flutter in her chest. "No, just observant, and maybe a little nosy." They talked for the rest of her lunch break. Easy conversation that flowed from topic to topic without effort. He didn't mention what he did, exactly, just that he worked with businesses and spent too much time in meetings. Zara found herself relaxing, laughing at his dry humor, enjoying the novelty of being listened to. "I should get back," she said reluctantly, checking her phone. "The Morrison project won't save itself." "Maybe I'll see you around," Vincent said, standing when she did. "Maybe," Zara agreed, already telling herself not to read too much into it. Men like him didn't pursue women like her. That was just reality. But the next day he was there again in the courtyard at lunchtime, and the day after that. They fell into an easy pattern. Sandwiches, sunshine when they were lucky, conversation that ranged from silly to serious. Vincent never mentioned what he did, and Zara never pushed. It felt like a separate space from the rest of her life, something that belonged just to her. "Tell me something you care about," Vincent said one day, watching her with those intense blue eyes. "That's a broad question," Zara hedged. "Then pick something specific. What's been on your mind lately?" She hesitated, then found herself telling him about the wellness initiative. About how she'd researched mental health resources, compiled data on employee burnout, created a comprehensive proposal for flexible schedules and counseling services. About how it had been sitting on someone's desk for 3 months with no response. "Why does it matter so much to you?" Vincent asked quietly. "Because people matter," Zara said, passion creeping into her voice. Because Sarah shouldn't be crying in the bathroom, and Marcus shouldn't be destroying his health for a company that sees him as expendable. Because we spend most of our waking hours at work, and if that work is making us miserable, what's the point? Vincent was quiet for a long moment. You really believe that, don't you? I do, he said, something flickering in his expression. But not everyone does. Most people talk about change without actually wanting to do the hard work of implementing it. Then they're cowards, Zara said bluntly. Sorry, I know that's harsh, but it's true. If you have the power to make things better and you don't, that's a choice. That's choosing profit over people, and I think that's fundamentally wrong. She expected him to argue, or maybe to laugh at her idealism. Instead, Vincent looked at her like she'd just said something profound. You'd be surprised how rare that perspective is in the business world. I work in the business world, Zara pointed out, and I know exactly how rare it is. That's why it matters. Their lunches continued through the week. Zara found herself looking forward to them, to the way Vincent listened when she talked, really listened instead of just waiting for his turn to speak. He asked questions that showed he remembered details from previous conversations. He made her laugh with stories about terrible business meetings and corporate jargon that meant nothing. He seemed genuinely interested in her life, her thoughts, her opinions on everything from city planning to the best coffee in Seattle. She was starting to like him, which terrified her. Men like Vincent didn't end up with women like her. That was a lesson she'd learned the hard way. On Friday, Zara delivered the Morrison presentation. It went well, despite the impossible timeline. The client was happy, Janet was pleased, and Zara added another success to her resume that wouldn't translate into a raise or promotion. She stayed late finishing up paperwork, alone in the office again as evening settled over the city. She decided to use the conference room on the executive floor because her desk lamp had burned out and facilities wouldn't replace it until Monday. The executive floor was always empty after 6. She could spread out her materials, work in peace, and maybe finally get ahead of her task list. Zara was so focused on her work that she didn't notice the time passing. 9 o'clock became 10 o'clock. Her eyes burned from staring at her laptop screen, and her shoulders ached from hunching over. I don't know why I even try, she muttered, staring at an email chain about the wellness initiative. Another rejection, this one couched in corporate speak about budget constraints and timing. 3 months of work, and they can't even be bothered to have a real conversation about it. Just form letter rejections and empty promises to revisit it next quarter. She stood up, pacing the length of the conference room. This is what happened when she worked alone late at night. All the frustration she kept bottled up during business hours came pouring out. You know what the worst part is? She asked the empty room. I'll keep trying. I'll revise the proposal again. I'll collect more data, find more cost-effective solutions, jump through whatever hoops they set up. Because I actually care, and apparently that makes me an idiot. Zara walked to the windows, looking out at Seattle's nighttime skyline. Somewhere out there, people were living their lives, going on dates, spending time with family, doing things that mattered. And she was here, arguing with herself in an empty conference room about a proposal that would probably never see the light of day. Sarah told me yesterday that she started having panic attacks, Zara continued, her voice softer now. 23 years old and she's having panic attacks about coming to work. That's not normal. That's not okay. And I wrote it all up, documented it, made a case for why this matters, and nobody cares. Or maybe they care, but not enough to actually do something about it. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass. I'm so tired. I'm tired of fighting for things that shouldn't be fights. I'm tired of being the only one who seems to think employees deserve to be treated like human beings. I'm tired of staying late and working weekends and putting my whole heart into a job that sees me as a line item on a budget spreadsheet. I heard you, a voice said from the doorway. Zara spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Vincent stood there in the same charcoal suit he'd been wearing at lunch, his expression serious and intent. But that didn't make sense. Vincent didn't work here. He worked in the building somewhere, doing something he'd never specified. "What are you doing here?" she asked, confusion overriding embarrassment. "I work here," Vincent said simply. "I've been listening to you, Zara, not just now, before." Cold realization washed over her. Before? When before? Tuesday night. Last week, when you were alone in this same conference room, talking about the wellness initiative. He took a step into the room. "I was in my office down the hall, getting ready to leave, and I heard your voice. I shouldn't have listened, but you were so passionate, so articulate about why it mattered. I stood in the doorway and listened to you make a better case for employee welfare than I've heard in any boardroom." Zara's mind raced, trying to make sense of this. "Your office is down the hall." "On the executive floor." "Yes." "What do you do exactly?" "I'm the CEO," Vincent said quietly. "Vincent Walsh. I own Walsh Marketing Group." The room tilted. Zara grabbed the back of a chair for support. Vincent Walsh. The Vincent Walsh. The man who'd built a marketing empire from scratch, who was featured in business magazines, who owned this building and 3 others in Seattle. The CEO whose desk her wellness proposal had been sitting on for 3 months. "You've been listening to me," she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. "Everything I said, you heard it all." "Yes," he moved closer, his expression earnest. "And everything you said was right. Sarah's panic attacks, Marcus's exhaustion, the way we treat people like they're expendable. You were right about all of it. Then why didn't you do anything?" Anger sparked through her shock. "You've had my proposal for 3 months. You could have implemented it, changed things, made a difference. Instead, you sent me form letter rejections and empty promises." "I never saw your proposal," Vincent said, and something in his tone made her believe him. "It never made it to my desk. That's one of the problems with corporate hierarchy. Important things get buried by middle management who are afraid of change or too focused on short-term profits." Zara stared at him, processing this information. "But you heard me. Last week and again tonight. You've been listening to me rant to empty rooms like a crazy person." "You're not crazy," Vincent said firmly. "You're passionate and intelligent, and you care about things that matter. After I heard you that first night, I started paying attention. Really paying attention to what was happening on the ground floor of my own company. And I realized you were right about everything." "So our lunches," Zara said slowly. "That wasn't coincidence. You were what? Spying on me? Testing me?" "No." Vincent looked pained. "At first, maybe I was curious about the woman who cared enough about her coworkers to fight for them even when no one was listening. But then I got to know you, Zara. The real you. And those lunches became the best part of my day. Not because you're an employee with good ideas, but because you're someone I wanted to know." Zara didn't know whether to be flattered or furious. "You lied to me. You let me think you were just some guy who worked in the building." "I didn't lie. I just didn't correct your assumption." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd seen him make dozens of times during their lunches. "And I know that's a weak defense. I should have told you who I was, but I was enjoying being treated like a normal person instead of a CEO. When you talked to me, you weren't trying to impress me or angle for a promotion. You were just you, honest and real and so incredibly passionate about making things better." "Why are you here tonight?" Zara asked. "Why now?" "Because I heard you again," Vincent said simply. "I was working late," and I heard your voice from the conference room. I heard the exhaustion and frustration and the fact that you're ready to give up, and I couldn't let that happen. Not without telling you that someone has been listening, that I've been listening." He pulled a folder from inside his suit jacket. "This is your wellness initiative proposal. The one that's been buried in Janet's desk for 3 months because she thought it would make her department look bad, like she'd been mismanaging her team. I had my assistant dig through every desk on every floor today to find it." Zara took the folder with shaking hands. It was her proposal, coffee-stained and dog-eared with her handwriting in the margins. "I read it this afternoon," Vincent continued. "Every word. And you're right, Zara. About all of it. We've been failing our employees, prioritizing profit margins over people. That ends now." "What do you mean?" "I mean I'm implementing your initiative. All of it. Flexible schedules, mental health resources, the employee wellness coordinator position you outlined. Everything." He met her eyes. "And I want you to head it up, not as a project coordinator, but as director of employee wellness. Your own department, your own team, the authority to make real changes." Zara felt tears prick her eyes. "Why?" "Because you care," Vincent said softly. "Because you see people as people, not resources. Because you're exactly the kind of leader this company needs, and I've been too blind to see what was happening right under my nose." "I don't understand," Zara whispered. 3 hours ago, I didn't even know you were the CEO. Now you're offering me a directorship." "I know it's a lot," Vincent acknowledged. "And I know I should have done this differently, should have told you who I was from the beginning. But Zara, these past 2 weeks, getting to know you, listening to your ideas and your passion, it's changed how I see my own company. You've changed how I see things." He took a step closer, and Zara could smell his cologne, something subtle and expensive. "I heard you when you thought no one was listening, and I realized that I'd stopped listening somewhere along the way. I'd surrounded myself with yes men and profit reports and lost sight of the fact that companies are made of people. Real people with real struggles." "So this is about business," Zara said, trying to keep her voice steady. "About making the company better." "It's about that," Vincent agreed, "but it's also about you. About the fact that I look forward to lunch every day because I get to talk to someone who challenges me, who makes me think, who doesn't just tell me what I want to hear. It's about the fact that I stood in that doorway last week and listened to you argue with empty chairs and thought that you were the most fascinating woman I'd ever encountered." Zara's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Vincent, I'm just a project coordinator. You're a CEO. A millionaire. We're from completely different worlds. Are we?" He moved closer still, until she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes. "Because from where I'm standing, we're just 2 people who care about the same things, who want to make a difference. Who maybe have been looking for someone who understands what that feels like." "I can't be your employee and whatever this is," Zara said, even as her body swayed toward him. "That's not ethical." "You're right," Vincent said immediately. "Which is why this is your choice, Zara. Take the directorship, report directly to the board instead of to me. We'll keep everything professional, or don't take it. Keep your current position and we'll figure out whatever this is between us. But I need you to know that I'm interested in you, not just your ideas. You as a person, not as an employee." Zara looked down at the folder in her hands, at 3 months of work that had felt invisible. "You really read it? The whole thing?" "Every word," Vincent confirmed. "Your section on preventative mental health care was particularly brilliant. And your cost-benefit analysis was airtight. You should have been presenting this to me directly months ago." "I tried," Zara said. "I sent it up the chain. I followed protocol." "And the protocol failed you," Vincent said. "That's on me." I've built a company where good ideas get buried because people are afraid to take risks. That changes now." He reached out, gently taking the folder from her hands and setting it on the conference table. "But right now, I'm not talking to you as your CEO. Right now, I'm just Vincent, asking if Zara would be willing to have dinner with me. Not in the courtyard with sandwiches, but a real dinner. Because I want to know more about you. Because these 2 weeks have been the best I've had in years. Because when you talk, I listen, and that feels like something rare and worth pursuing." Zara searched his face for signs of manipulation or corporate game playing. But all she saw was sincerity, vulnerability even. This powerful man was standing in front of her, essentially admitting that he'd been eavesdropping on her private frustrations and had developed feelings in the process. It should have been creepy. Instead, it felt like finally being seen. "One dinner," she heard herself say. "Somewhere we can talk about all of this. The proposal, the position, the ethics, everything." Vincent's smile was radiant. "One dinner, tomorrow night, I know a place." "Nowhere too fancy," Zara warned. "I'm not a fancy person." "I know," Vincent said, and the warmth in his voice made her believe he really did know her, had been paying attention to all the little details she'd shared during their lunches. "There's an Italian place in Fremont, family-owned, amazing food, quiet enough to actually have a conversation." "How does 7 o'clock sound?" "It sounds terrifying," Zara admitted. "But okay." They stood there in the conference room, the city lights twinkling behind them, something new and fragile forming in the space between them. Vincent didn't try to kiss her, didn't push for more. He just smiled, told her he'd text her the address, and reminded her to actually go home and get some sleep. Zara watched him leave, then sank into one of the conference room chairs. Her hands were shaking. The CEO had been listening to her, had heard everything she'd said in private moments of frustration and passion. And instead of thinking she was crazy or insubordinate, he'd been moved by it. Moved enough to find her proposal, read it, decide to implement it. Moved enough to ask her to dinner. She looked at the folder on the table, her 3 months of work. It had mattered after all. Someone had been listening, even when she thought she was alone. Zara gathered her things and headed home, her mind spinning with possibilities and complications. Dating the CEO was a terrible idea. Taking a directorship, reporting to the board, but in a company where she was potentially involved with the CEO was complicated. But the alternative was going back to feeling invisible, to fighting battles alone, to pretending the connection she felt with Vincent didn't exist. Her apartment felt different when she walked in that night. The same furniture, the same window seat, but suddenly the future looked different. Uncertain, yes, but full of potential. She texted Melissa, "You won't believe what just happened." The response was immediate, "Tell me everything." So Zara did, typing out the whole surreal evening in a series of increasingly frantic messages. Melissa's responses ranged from shocked to thrilled to cautionary, ending with, "So are you going to dinner?" "Yes," Zara typed back. "I think I am." "Then wear that blue dress I bought you for your birthday. The one you said was too nice for your life." Zara looked at her closet, where the dress hung still wrapped in plastic. "That seems like a lot for a first date." "It's a first date with a CEO who's been secretly listening to you advocate for employee rights and fell for you anyway. This is not a jeans situation." Zara smiled despite her nerves. "Okay, the blue dress." She spent Saturday in a state of controlled panic. Work felt surreal, knowing that Vincent was somewhere in the building, probably in his corner office on the top floor. She half expected him to appear in the courtyard at lunch, but he didn't. Instead, she received a text around noon. "Didn't want to make things awkward at work. Still on for tonight." "Yes," she texted back, then added, Are you always this considerate, or am I getting special treatment? You're special, came the reply. But I try to be considerate generally. Good to know. The afternoon crawled by. Zara tried to focus on work, but her mind kept drifting to the evening ahead. What did you talk about with a CEO over dinner? How did you navigate the power dynamic? What if this whole thing was a huge mistake? By 6 o'clock, she was home, staring at the blue dress. It was beautiful, midnight blue with a fitted bodice and a skirt that flowed when she moved. Melissa had bought it for her 26th birthday, insisting that Zara needed something that made her feel beautiful instead of just professional. She'd never had an occasion to wear it, until now. Zara did her makeup carefully, went for sophistication instead of her usual minimal approach. She left her hair down, dark waves falling past her shoulders. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked like someone who went on dates with CEOs. She looked like someone worth listening to. Vincent texted at 6:30. Sending a car should be there at 6:45. Is that okay? I know it's presumptuous, but parking in Fremont on Saturday night is terrible. Zara smiled at her phone. A car is fine, thank you. The car was not fine. It was a sleek black sedan with a professional driver who opened the door for her and called her Miss Zimmerman. Zara felt absurdly out of place and thrilled at the same time. This was not her life. Except apparently, tonight it was. The restaurant was exactly as Vincent had described. Cozy, family-owned, the smell of garlic and fresh bread filling the air. He was waiting for her at a corner table, standing when she approached. He changed out of his suit into dark jeans and a gray button-down that made his eyes even more striking. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and the way he said it made her believe he meant it. "You look different without the suit," Zara replied, letting him pull out her chair. "More relaxed." "I feel more relaxed," Vincent admitted, settling across from her. "Work Vincent has to maintain a certain image. This is just me." A waiter appeared with menus and wine recommendations. Vincent deferred to Zara, asking what she preferred. It was a small thing, but it mattered. He wasn't taking over, wasn't assuming, was treating her as an equal despite the vast difference in their bank accounts. They ordered, then Vincent leaned forward, his expression serious. "I want to address the elephant in the room. What I did, listening to you without identifying myself, was ethically questionable at best. You have every right to be angry about that." "I am angry," Zara said honestly. "Or I was. Now I'm more confused than anything. Why didn't you just come talk to me directly after that first night? Why the lunches in the courtyard, pretending to be someone else?" "I wasn't pretending," Vincent said. "I am that person. I'm also the CEO, but that's my job, not my entire identity. And after I heard you that first night, I was curious. I wanted to know who you were beyond the passionate voice advocating for change. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I researched you." "You researched me." Zara didn't know whether to be flattered or disturbed. "I looked at your employee file, your performance reviews, the projects you'd managed. And I realized you were consistently excellent, consistently undervalued, and consistently fighting for things that should have been priorities all along." He paused. "So I decided to see if you were as impressive in person as you were on paper." "That's when you started appearing at lunch," Zara said, the pieces fitting together. "That's when I started appearing at lunch," Vincent confirmed. "And I told myself it was about evaluating your potential for a leadership role. But the truth is, by the third lunch, it stopped being about business. You made me laugh. You challenged my assumptions. You talked about things that mattered, not because you were trying to impress anyone, but because you genuinely cared. And I found myself looking forward to those conversations more than anything else in my day." The waiter brought their wine. giving Zara a moment to process. When they were alone again, she asked, "What do you want from me, Vincent?" "Honestly." "Honestly," he met her eyes. "I want to get to know you better. I want to see if this connection we've developed over sandwiches in a courtyard is real, if it can exist outside of those lunchtimes. I want to implement your wellness initiative and watch you transform the company culture. And I want to do those things separately, so neither of us has to wonder if one is dependent on the other." "The directorship," Zara said. "You were serious about that. Completely serious." "It's yours if you want it. 50% salary increase, your own team, direct reports to the board. I had legal draft the paperwork this afternoon." He pulled a slim folder from beside his chair. "You can review it with a lawyer if you want. Actually, you should review it with a lawyer. Don't just take my word on any of this." Zara accepted the folder, her hands slightly unsteady. "This is moving very fast." "It is," Vincent agreed. "And if you want to slow down, we can. Take the weekend to review the offer. Take a week. Take whatever time you need to make sure this is what you want, both professionally and personally." Their food arrived. Handmade pasta with sauce that smelled like heaven. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, then Zara asked, "Why employee wellness? Of all the initiatives you could have prioritized, why that one?" Vincent set down his fork, considering the question. "My father built this company," he said finally. "He was brilliant at business, terrible at people. He worked himself into an early grave, had a heart attack in his office at 53. I was 25, fresh out of business school, suddenly running a company I barely understood." He took a sip of wine before continuing. "I told myself I'd do things differently. I'd build a company that valued people, that didn't sacrifice health for profit. But somewhere along the way, I got caught up in expansion and acquisition and market share. I became the thing I'd promised myself I wouldn't be." "And then you heard me ranting in a conference room," Zara said softly. "And then I heard you ranting in a conference room," Vincent agreed, a slight smile on his face. "Talking about Sarah's panic attacks and Marcus's exhaustion and how people matter more than profit margins. And it was like hearing my 25-year-old self, full of idealism and conviction. Except you had data and proposals and actual solutions instead of just good intentions." "I'm sorry about your father," Zara said. "Thank you. It was a long time ago, but it still shapes how I see things, or how I should see things when I'm paying attention." He reached across the table, not quite touching her hand but close enough that she could feel the warmth. "You reminded me to pay attention, Zara, to actually look at what's happening in my own company instead of just reviewing reports and profit statements." They talked through dinner, conversation flowing as easily as it had during their lunches. Vincent told her about growing up in Seattle, the pressure of inheriting a company before he felt ready, the loneliness of being at the top with few people he could trust. Zara shared stories about her family, her younger brother who never seemed to get his life together, her parents who'd never understood her drive to succeed. "They wanted me to stay in our hometown, get married, have kids," Zara explained. "Not that there's anything wrong with that life, but it wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to make a difference, to build something, to matter." "You do matter," Vincent said firmly. "You've mattered this whole time. The problem was that the people in positions to recognize it weren't paying attention." "You weren't paying attention either," Zara pointed out, "until you accidentally overheard me having a breakdown." "You're right," Vincent acknowledged. "And I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry that you had to fight so hard to be heard. But I'm paying attention now, Zara. Not just to your ideas, but to you." The weight of his gaze made her pulse quicken. This was dangerous territory. Getting involved with her CEO, even if she reported to the board, was complicated. Office romances rarely ended well, and when power dynamics were involved, they ended even worse. But the way Vincent looked at her, really looked at her, made her want to take the risk. "I need to think about all of this," Zara said as they finished dessert. "The job, the personal stuff, everything, it's overwhelming." "I know," Vincent said. "Take your time. No pressure, no expectations. Though I have to be honest, I'm hoping you'll say yes to both the directorship and to seeing me again." "Why?" Zara asked. "I mean, I understand the directorship. I have good ideas and I care about implementing them. But the personal interest, why me? You could date anyone. Someone from your social circle. Someone who understands your world." Vincent was quiet for a moment, then said, "Do you remember Wednesday's lunch? You told me about your Sunday mornings, reading in your window seat with terrible coffee and no agenda except enjoying the quiet. And you said that those mornings were when you felt most like yourself, most at peace." Zara nodded, unsure where he was going with this. "I have a penthouse apartment with a view of Elliott Bay, a espresso machine that cost more than most people's cars, and every amenity money can buy," Vincent continued. "And I can't remember the last time I felt at peace. The last time I felt like myself instead of the role I'm supposed to play. But when I'm talking to you, having lunch in a courtyard, or sitting here tonight, I feel like I can be honest. Like I don't have to perform or impress or maintain some image. That's rare, Zara. That's worth pursuing." Zara's throat felt tight. "I feel that too," she admitted. "Like I can say what I really think instead of what's professionally appropriate. It's terrifying." "It is terrifying," Vincent agreed with a slight laugh. "I'm terrified right now. Terrified you'll decide this is too complicated and walk away. Terrified I've screwed this up by not being honest from the beginning. Terrified that I'm my father's son after all, putting business before what actually matters." "You're not your father," Zara said firmly. "Your father wouldn't have read my proposal, wouldn't have offered me a directorship, wouldn't have cared that Sarah was having panic attacks or that Marcus was burning out. You care, Vincent, that makes all the difference." His smile was genuine and relieved. "So you'll think about it. Both the job and seeing me again. I'll think about it," Zara promised. "But I'm not making any decisions tonight. This is too important to rush." Vincent signaled for the check, which appeared and disappeared with discreet efficiency. They walked outside into the cool Seattle evening, the city alive with Saturday night energy. "The car will take you home," Vincent said, the sedan already pulling up to the curb. "What about you?" Zara asked. "I live close enough to walk. I could use the air to clear my head." He held the car door open for her, then hesitated. "Thank you for tonight, Zara. For giving me a chance to explain, for listening. For being exactly who you are." "Thank you for listening to me," Zara replied. "Even if the circumstances were strange, it meant something. Knowing someone heard me when I thought I was alone." She slid into the car and Vincent closed the door gently. Through the window, she watched him step back onto the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, looking somehow vulnerable despite his obvious wealth and power. The driver pulled away, and Zara turned to watch the city pass by, her mind spinning with everything that had happened. Sunday morning, Zara sat in her window seat with terrible coffee and the directorship offer. She'd read through it 3 times now, and it was everything Vincent had promised. The salary was generous, the authority genuine, the reporting structure designed to keep her independent from the CEO's direct influence. Legal had even included a clause about romantic relationships with executives, outlining disclosure requirements and safeguards. They'd thought of everything. Which meant Vincent had told his lawyers that he was interested in her romantically and wanted to make sure the professional arrangement was protected. The level of consideration and planning that went into that made her heart ache. Her phone rang. Melissa, calling for a detailed report. "So, Her best friend demanded. "How was dinner with Prince Charming?" "It was good," Zara said. "Really good and complicated, and I don't know what to do. Start from the beginning, leave nothing out." So Zara told her everything. The overheard conversations, Vincent's admission about listening, the directorship offer, the obvious attraction between them. Melissa listened without interrupting, her usual sarcasm replaced by genuine attention. "Okay," Melissa said when Zara finished. "Here's what I think. The job is a no-brainer. You'd be stupid not to take it. You've been fighting for this initiative for months, and now you have the chance to actually implement it. That's not about Vincent, that's about your career and your values." "And Vincent himself?" Zara asked. "That's more complicated," Melissa admitted. "Dating your CEO is risky, even with safeguards. But Zara, I've never heard you talk about a guy like this. You sound excited and scared and alive. When was the last time you felt like that about anything except work?" "Never," Zara said quietly. "Exactly. So maybe the question isn't whether it's risky, because of course it is. The question is whether he's worth the risk, and only you can answer that." After they hung up, Zara sat with her coffee and her thoughts. She pictured the next year of her life, taking the directorship, building the wellness program she'd envisioned, making real changes for people like Sarah and Marcus. She pictured doing it without Vincent in her personal life, keeping everything professional and safe. Then she pictured doing it with Vincent, having someone who understood her passion, who challenged her thinking, who looked at her like she mattered. The second picture felt fuller, more colorful, more alive, but it also felt more vulnerable. What if it didn't work out? What if dating the CEO tanked her credibility? What if she was making a huge mistake? Zara looked at the folder in her lap, at the opportunity she'd been fighting for. Vincent had said she could take the directorship and figure out the personal stuff separately. Maybe that was the answer. Take the job, prove herself in the role, and see where things went with Vincent naturally instead of trying to decide everything at once. She picked up her phone and typed a message. "I want to accept the directorship. Can we meet Monday to discuss details?" Vincent's response came within minutes. "Absolutely. 9 a.m. in my office, and thank you, Zara, you won't regret this." "What about the other thing?" she typed, her heart pounding. There was a longer pause this time. Then, "What do you want?" Zara stared at her phone at that simple question. What did she want? "I want to see you again," she typed. "But I need to take this slow. Build the program first, establish myself in the role, make sure we're doing this for the right reasons." "That's fair," Vincent replied. "More than fair. Can I still buy you lunch in the courtyard, as friends?" Zara smiled at her phone. "As friends. For now. I can work with for now. See you Monday." Monday morning, Zara wore her best suit and her most professional demeanor. She took the elevator to the executive floor, where she'd only been once before, and announced herself to Vincent's assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia who looked her over with undisguised curiosity. "Mr. Walsh is expecting you," Patricia said, gesturing to the corner office. Vincent's office was exactly what she'd expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the sound, modern furniture, shelves lined with business books and awards. Vincent stood when she entered, professional and warm at once. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to the seating area rather than his massive desk. "Coffee. Patricia makes the best in the building. Coffee would be great," Zara said, settling into a leather chair that probably cost more than her monthly rent. They talked through the details of the directorship: start date, team structure, budget allocations. Vincent had clearly been working on this all weekend, had thought through logistics and anticipated her questions. He was impressive in this mode, the CEO who'd built an empire, but he was also careful to defer to her expertise, to ask her opinion, to frame this as a collaboration rather than a directive. "I want you to have autonomy," Vincent said. "This is your program, your vision. I'll support you however I can, but I'm not going to micromanage or second-guess. You know what you're doing." "Thank you," Zara said. "That means a lot." "I also want to address the elephant in the room," Vincent continued. "Patricia knows that we've been having lunch together. She's discreet, but she's observant. Other people will notice eventually too. I want to make sure you're comfortable with how we handle that." "What did you tell Patricia?" Zara asked. "That I'd been consulting with you about employee wellness initiatives and was impressed by your work." "Which is true." Vincent's expression was carefully neutral. "If and when there's more to tell, that's your call, but I won't let anyone question your qualifications for this position. You earned this, Zara." They finalized the details, signed the paperwork, and shook hands on her new role. Director of Employee Wellness starting next Monday. It gave her a week to transition her current projects and prepare for the new challenge. "One more thing," Vincent said as she was leaving. "Lunch in the courtyard. I promise to keep it professional." Zara smiled despite herself. "Lunch in the courtyard. But you're buying. Now that you're not pretending to be a regular employee, you can afford it." His laugh followed her out of the office, warm and genuine. Zara felt Patricia's knowing gaze as she passed, but kept her head high. She had nothing to apologize for. She'd earned this opportunity, and whatever happened with Vincent personally would be separate from that. The next week passed in a blur of transition meetings and preparation. Zara trained her replacement on the Morrison project and her other accounts, documented processes, and said goodbye to her cubicle. Janet was professionally congratulatory, but clearly annoyed that Zara had somehow leapfrogged over her in the hierarchy. Zara didn't have the energy to care. Vincent met her for lunch every day, always in the courtyard, always with the easy conversation they'd developed. He told her about a board meeting where he'd pushed through funding for her program despite resistance from the CFO. She told him about her conversation with Sarah, who'd cried when Zara explained that mental health resources were coming. They talked about books and movies and the best pizza in Seattle. They carefully didn't talk about what they were to each other beyond friendship. But the awareness was always there, simmering under the surface. The way Vincent's gaze lingered on her face. The way Zara found herself noticing details about him. The way he rolled up his sleeves when he was relaxed, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the way he listened with his whole body, leaning forward like her words were the most important thing in the world. Her first day as Director of Employee Wellness, Zara arrived to find her new office set up and waiting. It wasn't huge, but it had a window and a door that closed and furniture that didn't come from a big box store. On her desk was a plant in a ceramic pot with a note. "For your window. Congratulations on everything you're going to accomplish. Vincent." Zara ran her fingers over the note, feeling the weight of his faith in her. Then she got to work. The next 3 months were intense. Zara built her team carefully. A mental health counselor, a wellness coordinator, an administrative assistant who actually understood what they were trying to accomplish. She implemented flexible scheduling, negotiated partnerships with local therapists and wellness centers, created workshops on stress management and work-life balance. She worked with HR to revise policies that had been driving people to burnout. She held listening sessions where employees could voice concerns without fear of retaliation, and slowly, things changed. Sarah stopped having panic attacks. Marcus started leaving at reasonable hours. The office atmosphere shifted from stressed and competitive to collaborative and supportive. People smiled more, thanked Zara in the hallways, told her stories about how the new policies had changed their lives. Vincent watched it all from a distance, supporting her budget requests and backing her decisions but letting her lead. They still had lunch together most days, their friendship deepening even as they maintained professional boundaries at work. He told her about his struggles with work-life balance, and she helped him see patterns in his own behavior. She told him about challenges with resistant managers, and he shared strategies from his years of leadership. "You're changing the culture," Vincent said one afternoon in early spring, 6 months after she'd started. "People are talking about this company differently. We're getting applications from top talent who have heard about our wellness initiatives. You're making us better, Zara." "We're making it better," she corrected. "None of this would have happened without your support." "My support and your vision," Vincent said. "Don't minimize what you've accomplished." They were in the courtyard, the same bench where they'd first met, though everything was different now. Zara was different, confident in her role and her impact. Vincent was different too, more relaxed, more present. The distance he'd been maintaining between them felt less necessary now, less like protection and more like habit. "Can I ask you something?" Vincent said, his tone shifting to something more personal. "Always," Zara replied. "How much longer are we going to pretend this is just friendship?" Zara's heart kicked against her ribs. "I don't know. How long do we need to, you tell me? You're the one who wanted to establish yourself first, make sure we were doing this for the right reasons. I think you've more than proven yourself, Zara. The question is whether you still want this." "Want me?" She looked at him, really looked at him. Vincent Walsh, CEO and millionaire, and the man who'd listened to her when she thought no one cared. The man who'd supported her vision and challenged her thinking and showed up every day with sandwiches and conversation. The man who looked at her like she was extraordinary instead of just useful. "I want you," Zara said simply. "I've wanted you for months. I was just scared." "What scared you?" Vincent asked gently. "That it would mess up my career. That people would think I only got the directorship because of our relationship. That it wouldn't be real. That I'd be projecting or confusing gratitude with attraction." She took a breath. "But mostly I was scared that I'd fall for you and you'd realize I'm just a regular person, and I'm not interesting enough to keep your attention." Vincent reached over and took her hand, his palm warm and solid against hers. "Zara, you're the most interesting person I've ever met. You challenge me, you inspire me, you make me want to be better. And you've more than proven that your career is about your talent, not about anything else. Anyone who suggests otherwise is wrong, and I'll tell them so myself." "That would kind of undermine the whole independence thing," Zara pointed out, but she was smiling. "Then you tell them," Vincent said. "You're more than capable of defending yourself, but Zara, I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of keeping my distance and watching you from across conference rooms and limiting myself to friendly lunches. I want to take you to dinner again, somewhere nice. I want to kiss you goodnight. I want to see if this thing between us is as real as I think it is." "It's real," Zara whispered. "I know it's real." "Then say yes. Say you'll let me take you out this weekend on a real date where we're not worrying about professional boundaries or office politics. Just you and me figuring this out." "Yes," Zara said, her hand tightening around his. "Yes to dinner, yes to figuring this out, yes to all of it." Vincent's smile transformed his entire face. "Saturday night, I'll pick you up at 7. No driver," Zara said. "Come yourself. I want this to be us, not CEO and employee." "Deal," Vincent agreed. They sat there for the rest of their lunch hour, hands linked, talking about everything except work. It felt like stepping into something new and terrifying and wonderful. Zara had spent so long fighting to be heard, fighting for her vision, fighting to matter. And here was someone who'd been listening all along, who'd heard her when she thought she was alone, who saw her as she actually was and wanted that person. Saturday night, Vincent showed up at her door in jeans and a button-down, driving his own car, looking nervous in a way that made him seem younger and more vulnerable. Zara wore a different dress, dark green this time, and left her hair down because she'd noticed Vincent looking at it whenever she wore it loose. "You look beautiful," he said, the same words from their first dinner but with more weight now, more certainty. "You look nervous," Zara replied, stepping into the hallway and locking her door. "I am nervous," Vincent admitted. "This feels important, like I need to get it right." "There's no getting it right or wrong," Zara said gently. "We're just two people spending time together, that's all." He drove them to a restaurant overlooking the water, more upscale than the Italian place but still intimate. They ordered wine and appetizers, and the conversation flowed as easily as always. But there was a new awareness between them now, permission to look longer, to let attraction show in their expressions. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," Vincent said over dessert. Zara considered the question. "I used to think I wasn't the kind of person who got the fairy tale ending. That I was too practical, too focused on work, too ordinary. I thought romance was for other people, people who were more interesting or beautiful or worthy." "And now," Vincent asked quietly, "now I'm starting to think maybe I was wrong. Maybe the fairy tale is different than I imagined. Maybe it's not about being swept off your feet by a prince. Maybe it's about being seen by someone who matters, who listens when you speak, who believes in what you're trying to build." Vincent reached across the table and took her hand. "You were never ordinary, Zara. From the moment I heard you arguing with empty chairs about employee wellness, I knew you were extraordinary. I just had to wait for you to be ready to believe it too." "I'm ready now," Zara said. "I'm ready to believe this is real." After dinner, they walked along the waterfront, the city lights reflecting off the dark water. Vincent kept her hand in his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. They talked about the future, about plans for the wellness program, about the art gallery opening Vincent wanted to take her to, about the book Zara was reading that she thought he'd enjoy. When they reached a quiet spot overlooking the bay, Vincent stopped walking and turned to face her. "I'm going to kiss you now, if that's okay." "That's more than okay," Zara said, her heart racing. He kissed her gently at first, a question more than a statement. But when Zara pressed closer, her hands coming up to his chest, the kiss deepened into something that felt like an answer to questions neither of them had quite asked. He tasted like wine and coffee and possibility. His hands were warm on her waist, holding her steady as the world tilted on its axis. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for months." "Me too," Zara admitted. "Since that first dinner, maybe." "Definitely since that day in the courtyard when you told that story about your terrible business school professor, and I laughed so hard I snorted." "You did not snort," Vincent said, pulling back to look at her with mock offense. "I totally snorted. It was mortifying." "It was adorable," Vincent corrected. "Everything about you is adorable and impressive, and maddening sometimes in the best way." They kissed again, slower this time, savoring the newness of being allowed to touch, to want to have. When Vincent finally drove her home, he walked her to her door like a gentleman from another era. "I'd invite you in," Zara said, "but I think we should take this slow." "I agree," Vincent said, though his eyes told a different story. "We have time. I'm not going anywhere, promise." Zara asked, suddenly vulnerable. "Promise," Vincent said firmly. "I heard you, Zara. All those months ago I heard you when you thought no one was listening, and I'm still listening. I'll always be listening." He kissed her goodnight, sweet and chaste, then waited until she was inside before leaving. Zara leaned against her closed door, her lips tingling, her heart full of something that felt dangerously close to love. The next few months were a blur of work and romance, both aspects of her life flourishing in ways she'd never imagined. The wellness program continued to expand, gaining recognition in industry publications and attracting attention from other companies wanting to implement similar initiatives. Zara gave presentations at conferences, wrote articles about culture change, became a voice in the conversation about employee mental health. And Vincent was there through all of it, supporting her from the background, celebrating her successes, helping her navigate challenges. They were careful at work, maintaining professional boundaries in the office even as their personal relationship deepened outside of it. They went to dinners and art galleries and weekend hikes in the mountains. They spent lazy Sunday mornings in her window seat, drinking coffee and reading in comfortable silence. They argued about movies and books and the best way to make pasta sauce, learning each other's quirks and habits and dreams. 6 months after their first real date, Vincent asked her to move in with him. Not to his penthouse with its expensive furnishings and city views, but to a house they'd pick out together, something that felt like theirs rather than his. "I love my window seat," Zara protested, even though the idea thrilled her. "We'll find a house with the best window seat in Seattle," Vincent promised, "with room for your books and terrible coffee maker and whatever else makes it feel like home to you." They found a craftsman house in Queen Anne, all hardwood floors and built-in bookshelves, and a reading nook with windows overlooking the city. It was too big for 2 people but perfect for the future Zara was starting to imagine. Dinner parties with friends, lazy weekends, maybe eventually children running through the rooms. Vincent bought it without hesitation, putting both their names on the deed even though his money paid for it. "It's ours," he said when she protested. "Everything I have is yours, Zara. You know that." Moving in together was an adjustment. Vincent worked long hours, brought stress home from difficult board meetings, had habits from years of living alone. Zara was messier than he expected, got cranky when she was hungry, needed alone time to recharge. But they learned each other, compromised and communicated, and built something that felt solid. One night, almost a year after they'd started dating, Zara came home to find Vincent in the kitchen, cooking dinner in his suit pants and dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Music played from the speakers, something jazzy and romantic. Candles flickered on the table. "What's all this?" Zara asked, setting down her bag. "I've been thinking," Vincent said, turning from the stove to face her. "About that first night I heard you in the conference room, about how you were talking to empty chairs because you thought no one was listening. About how wrong you were because I was listening and your words changed everything for me." "Vincent," Zara started, but he held up a hand. "Let me finish. You changed my company, yes. You created programs that are making real differences in people's lives. But more than that, you changed me. You reminded me why I started this company in the first place, what I wanted it to be. You made me better, Zara. You made my life better." He crossed the kitchen and took her hands, his expression serious and tender at once. "I love you. I've loved you for months, maybe since that first lunch in the courtyard when you told me about your perfect Sunday mornings. And I want all the Sunday mornings, Zara. I want to spend the rest of my life listening to you, supporting your dreams, building a future together." Vincent dropped to one knee, pulling a ring box from his pocket. "Zara Zimmerman, will you marry me?" Zara's hands flew to her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. The ring was beautiful, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds, something unique and thoughtful like everything Vincent did. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, of course, yes." Vincent slid the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her like she was precious, like she was everything. Zara kissed him back, tasting salt from her tears and joy from her laughter, feeling like all the fighting and struggling and refusing to give up had led to this moment. "I love you," she said against his lips. "I love you so much." "I know," Vincent said. "I heard you." They got married 6 months later in a ceremony that was elegant but intimate, surrounded by the people who mattered most. Sarah, healthy and thriving in her new position, served as one of Zara's bridesmaids. Marcus gave a toast about how Zara's wellness program had saved his marriage by teaching him about work-life balance. Vincent's best man told embarrassing stories about their college years that made Zara love her new husband even more. During their first dance, Vincent pulled her close and whispered, "No regrets." "Not a single one," Zara replied. "Though I still can't believe you were secretly the CEO that whole time. I ranted about you to your face multiple times." "You ranted about the corporate structure," Vincent corrected. "And you were right, about everything." "We were right," Zara said. "We figured it out together." "Together," Vincent agreed, spinning her under the lights while their friends and family celebrated around them. Zara looked around the room at the life she'd built, the love she'd found, the difference she was making. She thought about that lonely night in the conference room, talking to empty chairs, thinking no one cared about her ideas or her passion. She'd been so wrong. Someone had been listening, had heard not just her words but the heart behind them, had seen her truly and loved what he saw. 2 years after the wedding, Zara stood in the nursery of their home, rocking their infant daughter while Vincent assembled a crib that came with instructions neither of them understood. Their daughter, Emma, had Vincent's blue eyes and Zara's stubborn chin, and she was absolutely perfect. "I can't believe we made a person," Zara said, watching Emma's tiny fingers curl around her thumb. "We make a pretty good team," Vincent replied, finally getting 2 pieces of the crib to fit together. "We made a wellness program that's being adopted by companies nationwide. We made a marriage that works even when we're both exhausted and cranky. We can definitely make this crib." "The crib I'm less sure about," Zara teased. Emma made a small sound, and Vincent immediately abandoned the crib to join Zara, wrapping his arms around both of them. "She's going to change the world," he said softly, "just like her mother." "She's going to be loved and supported and listened to," Zara corrected. "That's all any of us really need." "Speaking of listening," Vincent said, "I've been thinking about expanding the wellness program to include childcare services. Flexible options for working parents, on-site facilities, the works. What do you think?" "I think you're already an amazing father," Zara said, leaning back against his chest. "And I think that's a brilliant idea. We should bring it to the board next month." They stood there in the nursery, the 3 of them, watching the sun set over Seattle through the window. Zara thought about the journey that had brought her here. The late nights and hard work, the frustration and determination, the moment when everything changed because someone had been listening when she thought she was alone. Vincent had heard her. Had really heard her. Not just her words, but her heart, her passion, her commitment to making things better. And in being heard, in being seen and valued and loved, Zara had found something more precious than any career achievement or recognition. She'd found partnership, true partnership with someone who believed in her vision and helped make it real. "I love you," she whispered, looking up at Vincent. "I love you too," he replied, kissing her forehead. "Both of you." Emma yawned, her tiny face scrunching up in an expression that made them both laugh. Outside, the city lights began to twinkle on, Seattle settling into evening. Inside, in their home filled with love and laughter and the occasional unassembled furniture, Zara Zimmerman Walsh held her daughter and her husband and felt grateful for every moment that had led to this one. She'd thought no one was listening. She'd been wrong. And that had made all the difference. Years later, when people asked Zara how she'd built such a successful career while maintaining a strong marriage and family, she always gave the same answer: find someone who listens. Not just to your words, but to your dreams, your fears, your passion. Find someone who hears you when you think you're alone, who values what you value, who sees you as you truly are and loves that person. She'd found that in Vincent, and he'd found it in her. Two people who'd both been talking to empty rooms, hoping someone would care, until the day they'd found each other and realized they'd been heard all along. The wellness program continued to grow, expanded to include child care and elder care and financial planning services. Zara spoke at conferences around the world, wrote a book about transforming corporate culture, mentored young professionals who were fighting the same battles she'd once fought. Vincent evolved as a CEO, prioritizing people over profit margins, building a company that was successful because it valued its employees, not in spite of valuing them. They made mistakes, of course, had disagreements about work and parenting and whose turn it was to do laundry. But they always came back to the same foundation: listening to each other, really listening, hearing not just the words but the heart behind them. And on Sunday mornings, when Emma was old enough to join them, the three of them would pile into the reading nook with books and terrible coffee and hot chocolate for Emma. They'd read together in comfortable silence, the city spread out below them, life happening all around but this moment belonging just to them. Vincent would look at Zara sometimes in those moments, and she'd know what he was thinking, that he was grateful for that night in the conference room, for the words he'd overheard, for the courage to pursue someone who'd seemed impossible. And Zara would look back at him and think about how she'd been so wrong about fairy tales, about who got happy endings and what those endings looked like. Because this was better than any fairy tale. This was real, messy and complicated and absolutely beautiful. This was two people who'd found each other at exactly the right moment, who'd built something together that mattered, who'd created a family and a life that was richer than either had imagined possible. What are you thinking about? Vincent asked one Sunday morning, noticing her reflective expression. About how I used to talk to empty conference rooms, Zara said. About how lost I felt, how invisible. You were never invisible, Vincent said firmly. I saw you, I heard you. I know, Zara said, reaching over to take his hand while Emma continued reading beside them, oblivious to the adult moment happening over her head. And that changed everything. It changed everything for me too, Vincent said. You changed everything for me. They sat there in their Sunday morning peace, hands linked, daughter reading between them, life stretching out ahead with all its possibilities and challenges and joys. Zara had stopped talking to empty rooms years ago. Now she had someone who listened, really listened, who heard her and valued her and loved her exactly as she was. And that, she thought, was the real happy ending. Not being saved or rescued or swept away, but being heard, being seen. Being loved for exactly who you are, passionate declarations to empty conference rooms and all. I heard you, Vincent had said that night, revealing himself in the doorway, changing everything with those three simple words. And he was still listening, still hearing her, still seeing her truly. Every single day, in 1,000 small ways and a few magnificent ones, he showed her that she mattered, that her voice was important, that her dreams were worth pursuing. Zara squeezed his hand, met his eyes over their daughter's head, and smiled. They'd built this together, the career, the family, the life. Two people who'd both felt unheard, who'd both been talking into voids until the day their voices had finally reached each other, and they lived, truly and completely, happily ever after.